Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It is 10 o'clock. So, welcome. Thank you for being a part of our first West Meets East virtual training. We will do this statewide virtual training once a month for a half hour time. So, we will be sure to keep it at that 30-minute mark so that you can get back to work or whatever you're doing. But again, thank you for being here today. And I am Vicki Stewart. I'm Executive Director of Employment Disability Resources. So I serve Sioux Falls and the surrounding area in Southeast South Dakota.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, everyone. And I am Heidi Meekum. I work for the Workplace Disability Networks, and we cover 9 counties on the western side of South Dakota. And here with us today is Tony Russell. Trying to make that
Yay.
exciting.
Good morning. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, we're happy that you could join us. So, Tony, as you were just saying, you got an unanimous vote in the Senate and you got an unanimous vote with the House committee. So why don't you go ahead and just dive right in and tell us about SB 81 and 82?
Well, if you don't mind, Heidi, I'll give a little bit of background.
Yeah.
I am currently the vice chair of the Rapid City Disability and Accessibility Committee, and I sit on the Rocky Mountain ADA Advisory Board, which covers 7 states. And I really got into this because it was a life-changing necessity for me. As we got into trying to help provide service dogs to veterans and first responders, we realized that we needed some legislation to help our community, whether it's the handlers or business owners, protect each other and give the best results for our handlers out in public. So we came up with 2 bills, Senate Bill 81 and Senate Bill 82. Senate Bill 81 talks about any person maliciously beating, injuring, or attempting to injure or harass a service animal. I'm probably going to say service dog most of the time because that's what I use. But this does cover the ADA guideline of service animals as service dogs and the honorable mention of miniature horses. So Senate Bill 81. Basically, you can't intentionally try to harm or harass a service animal. Senate Bill 82 is maybe even a little bit more important from the standpoint that we've seen it become an epidemic of people faking having service animals so that they can take their dog in public. And what this bill covers is individuals who are directly or indirectly making a statement that their animal is a service animal to get public access and misrepresenting what their animal is. This causes a lot of problems for service dog handlers and a lot of problems for retailers and business owners within our state, especially because we are a tourist state.
That's a good point, Tony. And that kind of brings me to a point as well. And that is to share that, today really is about clarity for you to share clarity with us about what changed, what didn't change, and really what this means for businesses and handlers across South Dakota. Vicki, do you have a question?
I'm sure. So, really, how did this legislation come about, Tony?
So both these pieces of legislation were, as they went through the legislative process through the Senate and the House, were kind of lumped together, but we wrote them as individual pieces truly because of my lived experience with my service animal. We've had people intentionally try to step on him, intentionally try to distract him from his job and working while we were out in public. And we've had multiple, unfortunately, negative reactions with animals that had a service dog vest on or were claiming to be a service animal that later turned out not to be. And in one of those incidents, actually had my dog be attacked and cause some not only physical harm but emotional and mental harm in him doing his job. And so we came up with these two bills to hopefully protect service dog handlers and make things better for our community.
Sure. And there seems to be a little bit of confusion around the misdemeanor language that's involved and whether law enforcement should be involved. What does that misdemeanor provision mean and how will it be enforced?
That's a great question, Vicky. I get this question quite a bit. And what this does is it makes it so that if you are misrepresenting your dog as a service animal, um, it makes it a criminal act now. So what this does is it takes it out of the civil courts and now puts it in the hands of law enforcement or um, the state's attorney or other folks like that. If your dog, if a dog is being misrepresented and a business owner feels like that dog is not under control, which is the wording that the ADA uses, and that dog is potentially a fake service animal, before the business owner has every right to ask the dog to leave. They are still going to render services to the individual with a disability, but the animal would have to leave. If there were more of a confrontation, though, it would have to go through civilian courts. So it was a civil matter. So the business owner would have to get a lawyer, would have to go through the legal process that way to try to recoup damages or other things. This now makes it a misdemeanor, so that class one, so that the business owner now can immediately call law enforcement and law enforcement can come and get involved and start an investigation. So this helps our business owners and our service dog handlers who truly do have service dogs, because now it takes it off of them to proceed through civilian actions, a lot of headache, a lot of time, energy that people with disabilities just don't have a lot of extra. And it puts it in the hands of law enforcement. So now law enforcement opens an investigation. Now, it is also a crime to lie to law enforcement. So law enforcement is going to ask the two questions that the ADA allows. Is this animal a service animal for the handler's disability? And what task does the handler, or excuse me, not the handler, what task does the service dog perform? It is very common for individuals to lie to business owners all day, every day, because they want to bring their dog in with them. And there's no real true repercussion to that. But lying to law enforcement now has different repercussions. And if in the course of their investigation, they find out that the animal is not a true service animal for the individual with disabilities, then there may be charges brought, which could lead to a significant fine, could lead to some jail time. And those are all things that we want to make sure we're hoping people want to avoid, so that makes it better for our handlers and business owners.
And
Wonderful.
and yeah, that's wonderful. And just to clarify one thing with you, Tony, the law enforcement should only be called if there is a present issue with the handler or the animal. They're not leaving the business, something like that. They shouldn't be called to verify the service animal, right? To like find
Absolutely
out if
not.
this, yeah.
Absolutely not. A business owner has the rights, those two rights to ask those two questions as I outlined in the ADA. Is the service dog is the animal a service animal that can perform a task for the individual with a disability? And also then what task does this animal provide? As long as the animal is under control, as outlined in the ADA, that animal is welcome within that business or that establishment, regardless of policy or things that they have. There are few exceptions if it truly does alter the business, like a surgical center um, or a zoo, um, because well, I've heard, the monkeys do not like service dogs, and it'll actually cause emotional hardship to the monkeys within the zoo or other zoo animals. Ultimately, though, to get back to your question, there should be no reason for law enforcement to be involved at any point. If the animal is acting out and is not under control, and the business owner asks them to leave, and the individual refuses at that point, then there would be a time where law enforcement could be involved. But as long as that dog is under control, as outlined in the ADA, there should be no need for law enforcement.
Can you clarify which piece of legislation you're referring to at this point?
Well, the question was primarily based on the misrepresentation of their service animal.
Okay.
Um, Now, if the animal is harmed or is intentionally being distracted or something like that, the handler or the business owner may choose to get law enforcement involved and call them. And at that point, a investigation would be opened. Again, that's something that would then fall on law enforcement in the legal system, making it better for our handlers. But um, that that would be a law enforcement issue then now because of these bills.
So Vicky and I primarily, obvious in our work, we deal with employers, and we deal with employers who are doing accommodations for individuals with disabilities. So taking that into a practical application for employers, like what can businesses legally do if they have an employee who has a service animal that is disruptive, and are they allowed to ask that handler to remove the animal? Are they, and what should businesses be considering when they're looking at their policies in terms of how they do that accommodation for an employee, as well as honestly for a customer?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you, Heidi. And you touched on it when you said policy. Every company needs to have their own policy on service animals. That should be something that they have in writing, black and white, whether it is for customers or for employees. There should be two different sections that outline both. But at the end of the day, we all have bad days. We all have aches and pains and things that bother us and things that come up, and a service dog is the same, or service animal. They can have a bad day. Whether it's a customer or an employee, business owner has the right to ask that service animal to leave if they are not under control, as outlined in the ADA. And that is essentially a 24-hour of 24-hour demand or request where the dog has to leave because they are acting out. Well, at midnight or the next business day, that dog has the right to come back in with their handler and be a member of that organization, or as a customer come in and do business with that organization. So the ADA is very clear on that because these dogs are animals, and as animals, they can have bad days, and we never want to discourage business or employers from allowing service animals in their establishments.
Thank you for clarifying. I think we'll switch now to some of the handlers' responsibilities. So, what are some behavioral expectations for service animals? How do we know that it truly is a service animal? How will they behave?
That's a great question, Vicky. Thank you. The ADA lays it out as under control. But what does that mean? It's a very shade of gray area. I think if you put two dogs together side by side, and one that's a service animal and one that is not, within a matter of minutes, you're going to be able to determine which dog has had some training and a connection with their handler. These dogs are medical devices. They're they're not just pets. They're medical devices that go with their handler everywhere. So they're going to be attentive to their handler. They're going to be focused. Most service animals perform a task that revolves around odor detection of some sort, and so, or mobility. So the service animal is going to be within 3 to 4 feet of their handler. They're not going to be um, wandering around. There are dogs that go out and search rooms, that will clear a room prior to their handler entering the room, but you can very clearly see that that dog has a purpose. They're going around and they're coming right back to their handler. So they always have that connection. They are under control of the handler, whether it is verbally or through a leash, or a e-collar potentially, depending on the individual's disabilities. But the attention to their handler and their mannerisms are most likely going to speak for themselves.
So in other words,
Very
they're
helpful.
not going to go in and scope it out and start eating food off of the buffet as a scope out, or doing things like that. They're going to sniff it and then go back out to their handler. They're not going to be like stealing a piece of bacon from the plate.
Absolutely. They're not going to be stealing food. They're not going to be begging. They're not going to be, um, they're they're not going to be just running around crazy, in interacting with different people. They're going to be on a task. Um, my service dog lays under the table when I go out to a restaurant. Does it beg? Yes, sometimes, because I do give him some scraps. Personally, that's my personal, because this dog has saved my life. And so I want to give him rewards and niceties at times. So yes, he does beg, but it's not in a way that is intruding on other guests, or impacting the business. He's still under the table and he's maybe looking at me, maybe drooling a little bit, but he is interacting with me and me only, not other patrons.
So that brings us to the question, can individuals legally train their own service animal, or
That's
do
a
they
good
have to be
question.
trained by an outsider?
That's a good question, Vicky.
That's a great question. And the ADA covers that very, very clearly. And I wanted to make sure that these two new bills within the state of South Dakota don't impede on that. An individual absolutely can train their own service animal. Um, what it comes down to, though, is individuals with disabilities, um, may not be able to. And so there are about 30 different organizations now within our state that do work with individuals to provide service animals or training to them. Some of them, or I'd say majority of them, do work with veterans and first responders, but there are others that work with any individual that has a disability. So an individual can absolutely train their own service animal for their own disability. It still has to meet the same standards, though. The animal does have to be under control, as outlined in the ADA, and the handler has the same responsibilities. They do and are legally required to answer the two questions from a business owner, when asked. So, as long as they're meeting that criteria, absolutely train your own service animal. Um, it's a huge cost savings because some of these dogs can be 20, 30, up to $60,000. So if you have the ability, we would never discourage anyone from training their own.
And one other quick question, fast answer. There is no official certification or registry. If any of that is presented or solicited, that is not a legit thing. You don't have to go to any registry, right?
The ADA lays it out, and our state laws all follow the ADA. There's no registry, there's no national registry, there's no national requirement right now for service dogs, though I would highly recommend following some of the AKC guidelines of getting a Canine Good Citizen certification, and going through maybe some of the other CGC, the urban, and some of the AKC testing pieces are phenomenal to help individuals. But service dog can come into your business with no identification, naked as the day they were born, because if they are a service dog required for a medical disability, leash laws do not apply if it is for that individual's medical necessity. The task that the dog is performing needs to be off leash. So absolutely train your own service animals. Make sure that they are applying and they're acting correctly as outlined in the ADA, and there will be no problems.
Awesome. Well, I am sure that there are other guests that are here with us today that might have some questions of their own. So we're going to go ahead and let you guys pipe in right now. If you have any questions for Tony, we want to make sure that this is helpful and practical for all of you. And Vicki and I asked the questions we could think of, but we would love to hear some of your questions if you have any. And while we're waiting for them to think, maybe we can ask you a couple other questions. How should organizations train frontline staff so that they know how to appropriately respond without escalating the situation? You've been in restaurants. You've had waiters question whether you should have that animal. They've tried to put you in. I mean, you've had some pretty hard experiences with restaurants. So what should businesses be looking at when they're trying to get their staff to understand how to be accommodating to these animals and their handlers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the very first thing we talk about is respect. Respect the individual that's coming into your business or organization. Treat them as if you would anyone else, who doesn't have a disability that you can see. Just because I have a dog with me doesn't mean I should be treated differently. The other piece is, please interact with the handler. Interacting with the handler then allows you the ability to process through your transactions, but you can ask the handler, can I pet your service dog? Most times, I'm probably going to say no. For me personally, because of how my dog does their task through odor detection, and you petting my dog and coming up to him is going to interrupt that odor bubble and that his detection abilities. But talk to the handler. Do not interact with the dog, please. If you want to give the dog a treat, ask the handler and hand it to the handler. Allow them the ability to dictate how you interact with their medical device.
All right. I don't see any questions from our participants, so I'll throw one more at you here, Tony. So how should HR, human resources, document service animal related incidents to protect both their business and the handler?
That's a great question. I think the last question and this question also require the answer that whether it's Heidi on the west side of the state or Vicky on the east side of the state, we have phenomenal training programs through each of your different organizations. And so I would say if you have questions, reach out to Heidi or Vicky, and they can help you navigate through some of these, and they can help offer trainings to you and your business. But if they're not willing to reach out or they don't have the time to reach out right now, I would say make sure that you're setting your policies up and sitting down and talking with the individual service dog handler about what their needs are, because each animal and each individual's needs are different. That could look like something where they get two 15-minute breaks a day. Well, maybe the service dog handler needs an extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes to get their dog to go outside to go potty. Um, so they may need a little bit of an extended break, or they may need a place to keep a kennel for their dog, depending on how the dog is trained and how close the dog can be to them during the work. So I think sitting down and having good open dialogue and questions is the best thing that you can do with your staff. But please reach out to Heidi and Vicky. They have phenomenal programs and can offer a lot of training and answers in these backgrounds.
Wow, that's an awesome plug. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, thanks.
Tony, so another question that we'll ask while we're waiting to see if anyone else has questions. What is the difference between an emotional, I made the joke about my cat being my emotional support animal, but a lot of people often get confused and think that their emotional support animal has the same rights as your dogs who are service animals to you. So what is the difference, and what can people be looking out for in terms of saying yay or nay? That's not what that is. Even dogs are sometimes passed off as that.
Right. There is a huge difference between emotional support animals and service animals. Um, Typically, the background of training is probably the one thing that sets them apart. Um, I highly recommend that any service animal or service dog goes through and meets the international standards, which is a minimum of 120 hours of training. And the dog has to demonstrate at least 2 to 3 medical tasks for the handler. That being said, though, getting back to the question, the divide between emotional support animal and a service animal is medical necessity. Is this dog and what they do for their handler medically necessary for the individual at all times and places? And that can only be determined by a medical professional. I can't determine medical necessity. Um, that's something that you need to speak with a medical professional about and determine if you need a emotional support animal or a service animal. Sometimes they may have similar tasks, and what they do may look similar to a service animal, but they're not medically necessary to be with the handler 24/7. So, medical necessity is the biggest divide between the two of them.
If I can, this is Dolores with Minnehaha County. If I can just follow up with a question about that. So do emotional support animals have the right or ability to be with a handler in certain situations? Is that up to the business? Like if somebody is using their emotional support animal because it helps them deal with stress and they have a stressful appointment at such and such building, is that up to that business then, or how does that work?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. Thank you, Dolores, for attending this and asking that question. So, yes, it's going to come down to the business's policy. And that's why I said earlier, a very clear, laid out, maybe even posted policy is necessary for businesses to have. And if you don't have that, please again reach out to Heidi or Vicky. We can get you a general template of what may be the best policy to have, or we can help work with you to develop your policy for your business. But a emotional support animal may be allowed into a facility if the policy allows it for a specific appointment, or things. We've seen where Emotional support animals are allowed within like our county courthouses for an individual who's testifying. Well, that's a rare incident. They're not going to bring that animal with them every time they enter that facility, but because of the nature of that, they would be allowed to. So having those clear, concise policies is very important, and we can help you work with those. But the short answer is yes, they may be allowed to. Pennington County has pretty good policies. If you are looking for some, I know that they have at least one individual with a disability that does have a working service dog that comes with their handler everywhere. So again, Bo, we can help work those policies if you would prefer to work with Heidi or Vicky. They're phenomenal.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's 10:30 already, Central Time, so we are ready to wrap up here. We just invite our attendees to continue to learn. We can provide continued education.
Yeah.
Both Heidi and I are here when you need us. Please reach out
Absolutely.
via email on our websites. And we hope that you will join us again. Our next training will be Wednesday, March 25th. Same
Yep.
time, same place. So
Do you-
please register.
And do we have a topic for that yet, Vicky?
I forgot what it was, Heidi.
So did I. But watch our social media and our websites. We will have it up very soon. I know it's something to do with job
Job
tests.
descriptions.
The job descriptions. There you go. If you're interested in that, join us.
Thank you again for attending. Enjoy the
Thanks
rest
for
of your
attending,
day.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks.